Hello, I'm Zorab and this is Byther Farm, and today I want to talk about bean supports. When we moved to this site 3 years ago, I had just no idea how windy it would be here. And the first year, I grew runner beans at the back there, and they got pretty blown around, but the supports stayed standing, but I didn't grow many beans. And the second year, I grew them in a bed there. And the middle of June, when we got the winds that we always get in June, they got flattened. And then last year I built a much sturdier support on this bed here. I used an awful lot of canes, I used a lot of hazel poles, and I made it really sturdy. And the other thing that I've managed to get done is to put in the framework for the runner beans, and I've been asked to show you how I do this. So I know you've seen it a couple of times before completed, but I thought I'd show you just how I do that. So I put a tripod of supports in at each corner, but these ones actually cross over at the front. So you've got quite a steady support in each corner, but it can't be too rigid because of the amount of wind we get here. It's got to have some room to manoeuvre. So I do that at each corner, and then at the centre I do another 2 tripods, but I do them slightly offset, so they're not opposite each other. They're slightly offset, so that the centre canes take up about 1/3 of the length of the bed, and then I get 2 long canes and put them together overlapping, tie around the centre bit, so I've got one very long cane, and put it across the top and tie it in to each of these support tripods at the centres and at the end. And then for this set, because I know we've got a particularly windy site, and this will just collapse in the wind blowing that way, I've put in some extra supports. So these poles have got a little Y at the top of them, and I've fixed them in here, and this one I've fixed in here, so that when the wind blows it pushes against these, and these effectively are load bearing canes, and they go down to the ground right next to the fence, so they're butting up against the fence, so as everything gets pushed this way the fence will stop it falling over, I hope. So now I've effectively got 2 horizontal supports way up there, and the next thing to do is to put the canes from the ground up to these supports. Predominantly our wind comes from the west, but there's a point in June where it comes from the south, and again southwesterly winds, and they knocked my beans over, and I really felt quite despondent last year, and I said this year I was going to make a much sturdier, more permanent support for them, and here it is. Mr. J has put in 6 chestnut fence poles into the ground. This is pretty solid, and then I have fixed pieces of pallet onto the poles at this height, and they're at this height because they're level with the top here. I know they're not level at the ends, but that's fine. This is basically as high as it could go. When I'm growing beans, I don't put my poles into a triangle like that. I cross them over so that the cross is quite low down, and then here's a cane, and then the plants can climb up, and the green bean pods hang down closest to the path, so I'm not having to hunt too much in between canes to find them. But that means that they need supporting on the outside, and previously what I've done is I've made the same shape as this, but out of bamboo canes, and fixed them high up. So this year the canes will go into the ground over on that side, but rest on this side, and then I'll use some baling twine to fix it into place, and the beans will all hopefully hang over the path. Now I use 8-foot canes, so there is very little chance of anyone getting damaged on the top of these. I really think that this is going to be strong enough. There's a little bit of give in it, which there needs to be, because if something's really solid, the wind's just going to rip it out of the ground. But I think that that's going to be just about perfect for our runner beans. Now, you might have heard me say that I grew my beans in here last year. Before you leave a comment about crop rotation, let me explain what I'm doing with the beans here. I am experimenting and seeing whether I can get the same runner bean plants to come back up a year or two, or maybe more, in a row. So in the autumn, when I cut the beans down, I didn't lift them, I didn't pull plants out. I cut them and left about 5 or 6 inches of stem, and then I mulched all over them, and that mulch has sat on there all winter, growing a fairly hefty crop of weeds on it, but they should come off fairly easily. And my hope is that this year the same plants that grew last year will reappear. Now, there's still plenty of time. There's no sign of them appearing as yet, and I wouldn't really expect to see them until the beginning of June. And if they haven't grown by the second week in June, I shall plant some more seeds and get those in, because there will still be plenty of time to get a really good crop of beans this year. So over the next few days, I'm going to clear all the weeds in this bed and give it another mulch, and get the bean canes in and fastened to the frame. And then I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that those little shoots from last year's beans reappear.